Hey there, Jeff Stein. Jeff Stein. How are you? Jeff, how are you?
Fine.
Yeah? How's Dave Stein doing?
He's doing good. um, he's supposed to be based out of the north of San Diego, but then his group immediately was deployed to Japan. So he's there for a while.
Wait, he's there, he's where for a while?
Japan.
But is he there now?
Yes. So he was in Korea, came back to California for 2 or 3 weeks, and then back to Japan.
So when did he go to Japan?
Wow. Back in like January.
Right. So is this affecting his deployment at all?
No. This is the same group that he was supposed to be with.
So it's so it has this hasn't affected his deployment yet.
No. But they want to come back to California. Just
Gotcha.
the groups out there. It's supposed to be like 4 or 6 weeks, and now it's going to be many, many months.
Right.
When he comes back, he's going to be quarantined because he's out of country.
And are people healthy aboard? So where is he now? What, is he in a?
Which part of Japan? I don't remember offhand.
But is he? But is he? He's not on board a vessel right now.
No,
Is he?
he's on a base, but then he's quarantined. He's stuck on his base. He can't leave the base.
Gotcha.
So he's kind of bored where he's at.
Understood.
He went between his Korea assignment and this new assignment. He was supposed to have like 3 weeks off. But because of a mistake or bad paperwork, that didn't happen. So it became a really bad week of transportation, and then be told after a couple of weeks, group instead of being California is moving to Japan. So he's supposed
to. It sounds like they had their act together in Japan. So I'm sure he's going to be fine, right?
Yeah.
I think Japan, from what I've read, Japan has managed their response really well. I think they're at the kind of the top of the Japan and South Korea. Both were managing really well for countries that.
Doreen.
Hey there.
Hi guys.
Hi, Doreen.
We're just getting an update from Jeff on Japan, on Dave Stein in Japan. Wondered how the corona was affecting our Navy, or at least part of our Navy. So
okay.
Japan's had 385 deaths out of 13,000 cases. So
wow.
They have pretty good amount of, decent amount of cases, but they've done a pretty good job. By the way, tonight is, as you know, is Israel's Independence Day. Celebration starts. We're going to do something. I was going to say at Bethany, but on our very own Zoom channel, and not this channel, but a different Zoom room. We're going to have our Israel celebration. It is Israel Memorial Day today, so we remember the fallen in Israel's history. And Israel's had 15,000 cases, so they've had more cases than Japan, which is, Israel's had 1,800 cases per million, whereas Japan's had only 100 cases per million. So it's affected Israel in a huge way. Interestingly, Israel has only 200 deaths, whereas Japan, as I said, has 385 deaths. So comparable to cases, Israel has more cases of it per population, and also net cases. They have half as many deaths, which is pretty amazing. Japan is a pretty industrialized, pretty sophisticated technologically, in many other ways, country, and Israel's done remarkably well for the size of the country. I mean, forget Israel compared to Japan or Italy or Spain, which have been devastated with deaths, total cases. but Israel has fared remarkably well. So I'm going to speak to the Consul General. We have our event tonight, and I'm going to talk to him for a decent amount of time about what's going on in Israel right now with regards to their response, and we're going to talk a little bit about that and beyond. Look beyond. I think a lot of people are wondering. I'm definitely wondering, when are we going to travel to Israel and other places? So we're going to talk about that. Obviously, some of it's just up in the air, but we're going to talk to him about what he's hearing and what his job is like now as a representative of another country, when your job is to represent that country, but at the same time you're in another country. And he's a really interesting guy. I've gotten to know him over the last 3 or 4 months. He only got stationed here at the end of last year, and we become I wouldn't say friends, but we're close enough that we're on a first name basis, I guess you could say. So it's an interesting life being a diplomat, if you will. Definitely, and it's not being a diplomat in Europe or in other places where there's it's California, and so you're a diplomat in Hollywood and in a pretty laid back area. So anyways, we'll talk about that. I was just kind of waiting for a couple more people to jump on, but we have
Mark, Rabbi, you're a traitor. That hat you have on.
Oh, I just realized I'm wearing my Twins hat. Where's my Dodger hat?
Too late, we know the truth.
I felt like an American League. It was an American League day today. I don't know. What difference does it make? Nobody's playing baseball right now. I could wear a Yankees hat. It wouldn't matter. I'm not going to wear a Yankees hat. Never wear a Yankees hat. But listen, my bigger problem is I have no air conditioning in my house right now. So
What happened?
You want to know what happened? We had honestly. Actually, fortunately, right now, Sandy Chefs is over. The wonderful Sandy Chefs is over here helping us get it back on. But we have by our air conditioning unit, we had rats that gnawed away our wiring, and so we had several uncomfortable days and several hundreds of dollars worth of work that needed to be done because of rats. So there you go.
You haven't turned ours on yet.
You're not feeding them pizza.
You haven't turned yours on yet?
No.
Erica's turned ours on, not me.
Holy moly. No, I wish I could have not turned. Well, it doesn't matter. I couldn't. I turned it on and then it didn't work. So
yeah, we don't have two stories, Rabbi.
I know. So that's the problem. I mean, honestly, the ground floor we don't have, and that's the one where we actually got air conditioning upstairs last night, which was beautiful. But downstairs we don't have it, and we don't need. I mean, we really don't need it. It's amazing. It's 20 degrees warmer upstairs. So, unless we were going to camp outside, which I thought about doing a couple days ago. So, yeah, it's not been fun when you're home, office, school, studio. This is my studio now too. When it's all there's nowhere to run to. Yeah. So I was at the temple this morning too. It's kind of sad,
Yes.
Not kind of sad. It's really sad that that's a building that's, completely empty. So, ours is not the only empty building. Every church and synagogue, virtually in California is empty. So we're not alone.
I went on YouTube and watched some previous bar mitzvahs from Temple Bethany, and it was wonderful to see the sanctuary filled with people.
Wait, where did you watch them at? Where are they at?
YouTube. Something Gus, his last name Gus.
Yeah.
Adam.
I watched his bar mitzvah, and I swear I saw something I thought was me, but I know I wasn't there. But I enjoyed it so much.
You're right. There are a few people that have posted, because they post their stuff up on YouTube. You're 100% right. There are some ones out there that people have posted. I don't know. Do we have rights to that? Can we
It was great.
did we?
That looked gorgeous.
So
And you were 5 years younger.
I don't even want to, Diane,
Yeah, you were 5 years younger.
this last, these last months have aged me considerably. I don't even want to, somebody told me, what was it? Oh, no, I was looking at, unfortunately, by the way, too, some of you know this, that yesterday was the first anniversary of the Poway shooting. I think some of you may have seen that. I hope you, well, I just reminded everybody that was a very sad anniversary. But when somebody told me that was last year, I didn't believe them. I honestly thought it was like 5 years ago. And it just shows you again how time has been.
Well, talking about getting old, Rabbi, I was looking at you at Andy's bar mitzvah, which was in 2004.
Yeah. Well, that's
you had a lot more hair.
That was
15, that's not fair going back that far.
In all fairness, that was 15 years ago. So yeah, it's let's move on. And with that, let's not belabor the fact that, but as I said, I honestly feel that this last 2 months has felt like 6. I mean, I'm sure I'm not alone in feeling that way. So, and I guess the good thing is it's kept the Nathans here.
Here we are.
It's not like we can see them, but not like we can hug them.
And the funny thing is if they were back in Greenwood Lake, they would still be able to
watch. We can watch.
We could do this and they'd be no different. But yeah, it's just nice to know that they're nearby. So is everybody staying okay? Everybody staying healthy? Normal? I guess you're all here, so.
Normal.
That's a good sign. I see Erica's here online.
Yay!
Her birthday was last week, right after Mike Schwartz.
What about me?
Her cousin Mike Schwartz.
Hey, my birthday was
yes.
What about me?
Hello. I was just giving a shout out to her birthday, Bill. It's good to have.
He left. You made him leave.
We've got Bill Schwartz too, but I was trying to acknowledge Erica's birthday, but that's okay.
My birthday was April 10th.
Your birthday was in the midst of this too.
And I couldn't go to Hamilton, so let's just go on.
No, yeah, it's Tracy's birthday coming up in a couple of weeks. Yeah, there's going to be a lot of us that are going to have birthdays during this period, unfortunately. But
Rabbi,
yes,
I just want to say for those of you who are not my Facebook friends, but you know, with this quarantining and all, my birthday was amazing. Kimberly brought the kids over and sent me a text message saying, "Come outside," but she tried to warn me to be careful, but I didn't see that. So I stepped out my front door, was so excited to see the kids with sidewalk chalk in the driveway that I didn't look down, and I stepped right into a container of cupcakes that she had baked for my birthday and left right outside the door. But it was amazing. The kids
that's like a comedy. It'd be in a movie.
It was great. It was actually a great birthday.
So were there any cupcakes that did not get stepped on?
Oh, we ate them anyway.
You might
was a plastic covering.
Yeah, fortunately, she had put saran wrap across the top, so they were smushed.
But they were smushed but tasty.
Foot cupcakes. So we've got we've got 16 homes. Oh no! I just went on Facebook. I just saw. Unfortunately, I just read Brad Mendelssohn's mother passed away this morning. So that's too bad. She was 88 years old, and hadn't.
That's not old enough anymore.
And so I'm just reading it because I just saw the Facebook post. But yeah, wonderful lady. She lived in Oakmont. So that's what happens when you go on Facebook. But I was making sure, I just wanted to make sure everybody knows we're actually live on Facebook right now. So don't forget, This is not just a
I
Zoom.
put lipstick on.
This is actually being broadcast. So
I can't see
don't-
you.
if you
I
don't
know,
wanna
but
be-
I did it for me.
you don't want to be on TV right now, and there are 3 people watching right now. So if you don't want to be part of this television production, then take your screen take your camera off. But we're gonna get going. And I titled today's class, because now I'm titling the classes. This one's called Jacob's Women, which I thought was kind of a lurid title. Maybe not exciting. Maybe not as tempting or teasing enough, because this is a pretty wild portion that we're reading today of Midrash. This is some real. Again, a lot of people know these stories, and some of you even know the Midrash because it's really it's famous Midrash. So I will tell you that some of you probably know this, but you may not know all the Midrash. You may not have seen how deep some of this Midrash goes into the relationships that Jacob has with his wives. And yeah, we're gonna take a look at this, and so we left off last time, and I'm about
Wait,
to
Mark?
share. Yes, sorry, yes.
That's okay. Before we go on, if it's okay, I'd love to dedicate today's study to my mom.
Yeah.
Today was her English, is her English yard site. Yesterday was her Hebrew yard site, which we all matched up. But she was a lifelong learner, studier. She would be cooking a lot these weeks, wishing she could go to a garden or a park, and reading as much as she could get hold of. But so I want to dedicate that to her. And my father can hear us and see us, but not speak. We've made improvements.
What? Wait, because your dad has been here many times.
He loves this class.
How's this happening?
Well, we've got the computer. He can, like I said, his computer doesn't have a camera or a microphone.
Okay.
And the phone is too small.
Okay.
So we're making progress because he can hear and see us. So hopefully next week we'll have it so he can participate.
I hope so.
Yeah, we're making progress.
Well, I'm glad he's here with us, with us in partially. So we can have him. Well,
Partially with us.
It was wonderful if he was able to say something. So we're going to take a look at this. We're going to say the blessing over studying Torah today, which we forgot till the end last time. But Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah, for studying Torah. And again, if you jump off early, remember that tonight at 7:00.
Yes.
Join our Zoom call.
He's glad you can participate.
Yes. Join our Zoom call with the Consul General, and get a little taste of Israel. And we were going to try to encourage everybody to get some falafel and get some Israeli food to enjoy, but it was hard to coordinate with the restaurants to try to do that. But we really did want to try to do that. So we're gonna jump into the text, and again, some pretty wild stuff. I will tell you that we have we will have that. I want to make sure that I start at the right place, because we actually read into this a little bit. I don't think we actually ended at the beginning of the new. So I'm going to show you where we left off. Let me share it up right now and refresh people's memory. And if you were not here last time, that you in the event that you were not here at all, I'm going to share a little bit of what we did last time. So Jacob when he gets to Haran to see his family, his mother's family, Rebecca's family, that it says in the Torah that when he first beholds Rachel, his cousin, that he cries. And so it's an interesting question that the Midrash will pick up on, which is, why does he cry? Why is that the reaction that he has when he sees his cousin? Why is it? Why is that what happens? And by the way, it doesn't just say he cries; it says that he kissed Rachel and then cried. So it seems really strange. Both of those things go together, and that he kind of is out of order for him to run up and kiss her, even though they are cousins, which is, the definition of kissing cousins, if you will. But this is, it seems kind of strange. And as we mentioned last time, Jacob really can do no wrong in the rabbi's eyes. So they're not going to have him do anything that was inappropriate. But they talk about, the rabbis do talk about it here, and we'll explain why right now. And I think this is where we left off last time. Jacob treated Rachel at once as his cousin, which caused, this is the last part we read, which caused significant whispering among the bystanders. They censured Jacob for his demeanor toward her, for since God had sent the deluge upon the world on account of the immoral life led by men, great chastity had prevailed, especially among the people of the East. Didn't seem to be that way in Sodom and Gomorrah, but at least amongst the people of Haran and Abraham's people, the people from the East, non-Canaanite people, if you will, they were very chaste, and they did not do the kinds of things that brought on the flood. So it says, the talk of the men reduced Jacob to tears. Scarcely had he kissed Rachel when he began to weep, for he repented of having done it. So according to this Midrash, Jacob cries because of what he did, because of kissing her. So he repents of it. But this is where we're going to pick up. And we're going to read about Jacob with his uncle, Laban, and the craziness that ensues from there. So, Rosemary, would you like to start? There was reason enough for his tears?
There was reason enough for tears. Jacob could not but remember sadly that Eliezer, his grandfather's slave, had brought 10 camels laden with presents with him to Haran when he came to sue for a bride for Isaac, while he had not even a ring to give to Rachel. Moreover, he foresaw that his favorite wife, Rachel, would not lie beside him in the grave, and this too made him weep.
So the other answers that we get from the Midrash of why he cried was that he was sad that he had nothing to give for the bride price. So this also caused him tears. He had nothing, because as we read in last week's Midrash, last couple of times, we've been reading about why he came to Haran with nothing, that he was assaulted by Esau and Esau's family, taken away. They took away everything he had, which is why he came there with nothing. He would have had stuff, but because of that, he has nothing, which is why he ends up, as we're going to read, work for his father-in-law for the bride price. So that's one possibility. There's another possibility the Midrash gives, which is crazy, if not beautiful, very touching and romantic, which is that when we read many, many chapters later, many, many years later, about Rachel dying, she's buried in a separate grave, separate from all the other patriarchs and matriarchs. And according to this Midrash, that's why he cried, because he knew that Rachel wouldn't lie beside him for eternity. I mean, it's beautiful. It's also a little strange, definitely prophetic. It implies that Jacob had the ability to see the future, and I guess that's not strange, but that in particular, that fact would make him upset. It's based on the fact that when Jacob on his deathbed is still talking about Rachel's death, and it still affects him. So the Midrash isn't based on nothing. It's based on Jacob's own words, his own feelings. But it is strange that we'd have a Midrash that gives us that possibility.
No.
All right, let's continue.
As soon as Rachel heard that Jacob was her cousin, she ran home to tell her father about his coming. Her mother was no longer among the living, else she would naturally have gone to her. In great haste, Laban ran to receive Jacob. He reflected, if Eliezer, the bondman, had come with 10 camels, what would not the favorite son of the family bring with him? And when he saw that Jacob was unattended, he concluded that he carried great sums of money in his girdle, and he threw his arms about his waist to find out whether his supposition was true.
So let's pause right there. What's the Midrash? What does the Midrash just tell us about Laban? Right away, we know he's a greedy guy.
Yeah.
This is not a good person. Now, where was he? He was, so he's at home. Midrash also tells us that his wife is no longer alive. Interesting. We don't know that from the text. We never hear about Rachel and Leah's mother. So is it possible? Yeah. But it doesn't, the rabbis went there because essentially he's the one who's calling all the shots. It also, again, focuses on his greed. He was, as a young man with his sister Rebecca. Remember, Rebecca and Laban are brother and sister. He was there when Eliezer came and brought all this treasure to get Rebecca to come back to Isaac as his wife, and Abraham sent all this money. And so they're saying Eliezer was a bondman. He was a servant, a slave. If a slave was entrusted with that much money, how much does the family get? How much is a Jacob, Abraham's grandson, walking around with, right? Well, this is all based on a line from the Torah, which is saying when Laban ran to greet him, he embraced him and kissed him and took him into the house.
And frisked
So
him.
the rabbis are playing off that he embraced him. So they're not going to give Laban any credit for being warm and loving to his nephew. Jacob was his nephew, after all. No, this was his way of patting him down and seeing what he had on him. Because he doesn't seem to have anything with him. He doesn't have camels and horses and a bunch of stuff in the car. So he's got to have it on him. And that's not the case. So this is freaking Laban out. He was sure this was the payday. So he's been waiting, maybe he's been waiting for this until he would see someone from Isaac's home coming to do this match. And that payday finally arrives, and it don't look good. Laban is not happy. So let's read what happens.
Disappointed in this, he yet did not give up hope that his nephew Jacob was a man of substance. Perhaps he concealed precious stones in his mouth, and he kissed him in order to find out whether he had guessed aright.
So not only did he embrace him to pat him down, he kissed him.
That's freaky.
He kissed him to see if there's any jewels in his mouth. So that's, yeah. What do you got?
That's a little icky.
Yeah. Well.
So it wasn't just a little kiss on the cheek, huh?
Nope. There seemed to be a little tongue on this one. That's how crazy Laban is. That's how greedy he is. That's how bad he is. That even the things that seem like they're nice, the rabbis turn them into acts of wickedness and of deceit and of greed. Because Laban can't even do something as far as greeting his nephew right. So it's kind of interesting. It's an interesting midrash on the hug and kiss. Here we go.
But Jacob said to him, "You think I have money. No, you are mistaken. I have but words." Then he went on to tell him how it had come about that he stood before him empty-handed. He said that his father Isaac had sent him on his way, provided with gold, silver, and money, but he had encountered Eliphaz, who had threatened to slay him. To this assailant, Jacob had spoken thus. Know that the descendants of Abraham have an obligation to meet. They will have to serve 400 years in a land that is not theirs. If you slay me, then you, the seed of Esau, will have to pay the debt. It would be better, therefore, to take all I have and spare my life, so that what is owing may be paid by me. Hence, Jacob continued, I stand before you bare of all the substance carried off by Eliphaz.
So let's pause right there. So that's a weird Midrash, which we already read, basically, which is that Eliphaz, Esau's son, is Jacob's nephew, almost kills him, or threatens to kill him. And Jacob's way of talking him out of this, and again, Jacob using his brains, says to him, we're going to be slaves in Egypt, and if you kill me, you and your descendants are going to have to be the slaves. So it's a weird, first of all, who would believe that? But assumedly, everybody kind of knew that Jacob was a prophet and had these gifts. And so they were, that's assumed by the writers. And that Jacob pointing this out made Eliphaz and Esau's family scared of messing with them, because Jacob says essentially, if you kill me, you're going to have to be the ones to be the slaves, and you want to take our place? Do you want to take the place of the Jewish people? So it's kind of a funny, if you take it by extension, it's basically Jacob telling Esau and his family, if you want to be the Jews, go ahead and kill me, because you'll be the only one left, and then you'll have to live our lives. Because it's not my life. Jacob's saying, this is going to be in the future. This is my descendants. These are my grandchildren that will be slaves, and great-grandchildren. But if not, it'll be your family that'll be slaves. Now, on the other hand, there are no descendants of Esau anymore that we know of. The Jewish people are still here. Jacob didn't focus on that part, which is that, yeah, you're going to be slaves and you're going to have a horrible history, but at least you'll have a history. That's not that part he left off, but he did kind of tell him this. It gets weirder. Promise you, it's about to get really weird.
This tale of his nephew's poverty filled Laban with dismay. What? He exclaimed. Shall I have to give food and drink for a month, or perhaps even a year, to this fellow who has come to me empty-handed? He betook himself to his teraphim to ask them for counsel upon the matter, and they admonished him, saying, beware of sending him away from your house. His star and his constellation are so lucky that good fortune will attend all his undertakings, and for his sake the blessing of the Lord will rest upon all you do, in your house or in your field.
Okay, so let's talk about this for a second. What's going on here? It is a very strange thing. Teraphim. One of you very accomplished scholars, tell me what teraphim are. What are the teraphim? Teraphim.
It's the kind of idols.
Yes. And we know that Laban has teraphim because, why?
Because when Rachel leaves the house, she hides them.
And they're clearly important. They are...
They're kind of household idols, aren't they?
Yep. But the problem is the word teraphim is used a few times in the Torah. And we know that it's similar to the words that are used in other ancient Near Eastern language to mean idols. The problem is that what kind of idols, how big are they? What do they look like? What do they do? Now, there's a whole bunch that's weird in this section you just read, Rosemary. not least of which these Teraphim are,
They're oracles and they have power.
they work.
Yeah.
They work. And they speak the truth.
Mm-hmm.
When the Torah talks about Teraphim, it seems as though that they're idols and that they may be like handheld idols, which we find all over Israel. But there are other places where Teraphim are mentioned, especially in the story of King Saul and David, where Michal, King Saul's daughter and David's wife, first wife, uses a Teraphim to pretend that it's David in bed, puts the Teraphim in the bed, the Teraph puts the idol in the bed, and uses that to make it seem as David is still sleeping, which implies that this is not a little statue, that this is a big mannequin. This is a household idol. Would have been, well, I guess in King Saul's house, would have been the size of a person. Could make somebody think it's a person. There's another problem here, though, which is that these Teraphim speak, and they actually have powers. And the rabbis were interested in them. By the Greco-Roman period, they may have made a whole nother, they might have had a whole other meaning, but they're clearly idols, and they're clearly used for telling the future, and they are clearly magic. I'm going to show you a picture of what these Teraphim actually might have looked like. Because these ones that are mentioned right here don't seem to be just idols that have a little statue that you'd hold. Also, they don't seem to be fully like a full human representation, because as Rosemary reminded us, we know about these Teraphim, these ones in particular, because it says that Rachel took them with her. She stole them. So if they're like full-size mannequins, wouldn't have been able to get them out of the house so easily, and definitely wouldn't have been able to put them underneath her. Because if you remember in that story, she actually will then say, when her father comes in and says, I want to look where underneath you, she says, I'm menstruating, I can't get up, which is a really strange story in the Torah. That's in the Torah. We don't talk about it usually until we're adults, but these Teraphim seem to be different. And I'm going to tell you, I'm going to show you a picture of these Teraphim that we have found in ancient Israel. And here they are. Rosemary's going to love this one.
Oh.
I'm going to make it nice and big.
I don't see it.
I see it.
Yeah, it's a skull.
It's a skull.
Why don't I see it?
I don't know. You don't see a text right now. Did you see a text before?
Yes.
And you don't see this. What do you see now on your screen, Doreen?
You with your books behind you?
You're not seeing a screen then.
Oh.
I don't know. I'm not sure. I'm not sure what to do. With your
Don't worry
screen.
about it.
So this is a skull. Archaeologists started finding these in strange places in ancient Israel. Actually, this one here, I think, was found in Jericho. It is most definitely a skull. You can see that it's a skull, but there seems to be some other stuff going on in here, right? So what they did with these, what we know from the archaeology, is they would take a skull from a person, that's a person's skull, that's a human skull. They would take the skull, they would plaster it. Well, first, obviously, they took it from a body, and hopefully not a living body, but maybe, who knows. They took it, they plastered it, and then they would oftentimes take shells or jewels and put them in where the eyes were. They probably also put stuff where the mouth was too. And they would very much use these as oracles. So what the Midrash just described is probably very close to what people did with their Teraphim. So this is not an idol. I mean, it's a magical thing, not an idol though. This was a person at one point that they turned into, was it an ancestor? Was it an enemy? Was it a holy person? Was it a priest? That we don't know. But this is not your typical statue. So we know that they did this. The Midrash gives us the story of how this was used. And yeah, it's pretty troubling to think that people have these in their house.
So it was just the skull?
Yeah, yeah. Well, these ones that we've excavated. So this one was actually excavated by, I think this one in particular was excavated by Kathleen Kenyon, the archaeologist, the woman who excavated Jericho for the British. Look, we found enough of these in other places to know that this was a pretty widespread practice amongst the Canaanites and the people that inhabited the land. Again, how does it talk? We don't know. But I'll tell you one thing. It's much more likely that something like this talks, or at least people imagined it talked, than a little statue.
Mm-hmm.
Very easy to imagine this. And by the way, I will point out that people use psychedelic drugs. So it's very possible that they used some kind of a hallucinogen. And if you use a hallucinogen, it don't take a lot to then get to that skull talking to you. It really doesn't. I mean, you could have a skull talking to you without actually having a skull in your hands. But if you're on a hallucinogen and have a skull in your hand, it's even easier to get that skull to talk to you. So it's very possible that that's exactly what we have here, is a skull that that Laban was talking to. So I just wanted you to see it. And because we have this great feature now of being able to share stuff, that I wanted to take advantage of that and share with you what Laban might have been talking to, what Rachel might have stolen from her dad. Which, by the way, when you think about it, it's a little creepy, isn't it? It's even creepier that she was sitting on them.
Sitting on one, yeah.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say, if anybody remembers the book, The Last Unicorn, there's a talking oracular skull in that, and I had no idea those were real things.
Yeah, there's also an Anne Rice book that people want to be freaked out by. It's got very Jewish. It's actually based on the book of Daniel, Servant of the Bones. For Interview of the Vampire, fans, you can jump on Servant of the Bones, which is all about how people in the ancient Near East would do this. And it is, it's really troubling. It's troubling to our sensibilities for a lot of ways. Not only, again, when we talk about why Judaism believed in burying people and keeping them, respecting their bodies, it's partly because this stuff was real. I mean, your body could wind up like this. Not just a grave being robbed or again, there being some kind of destruction or humiliation that people would visit on a grave. It probably wouldn't happen to a normal person, maybe a king or a ruler, a leader, but that, like, God forbid you're a smart person or well, you know what? We did a little bit of this with Einstein, by the way, when you come to think of it. There was his brain was dissected and people kept pieces of his brain so that they could study it. He allowed it to happen. But in a weird way, Einstein's brain, actually somebody wrote a book about it. That was a little bit like that. But if God forbid you happen to be a more prophetic type person or even a person who, again, thinks about the future, or I'm trying to think of some of those people who wrote some of those books that try to predict, Alvin Toffler and some of those other futurists that would try to predict what the future would look like. If God forbid you were good at this, people would take your skull and put it, plaster it up and say, let's keep that skull around because it may have some secrets for the future that we can ask it. So it's kind of sad that these kind of things would, we had to prevent these from happening by telling people, well, you got to bury people. So let's continue on with this. Again, Jacob's future is a very good one. This helps Laban make the decision that he's about to make. And here's what happens.
Laban was satisfied with the advice of the teraphim, but he was embarrassed as to the way in which he was to attach Jacob to his house. He did not venture to offer him service, lest Jacob's conditions be impossible of fulfillment. Again, he resorted to the teraphim and asked them what reward to tempt his nephew, and they replied, "A wife is his wage. He will ask nothing else of you but a wife. It is his nature to be attracted by women, and whenever he threatens to leave you, do but offer him another wife, and he will not depart."
So this one, I got to say, Jacob is usually treated by the rabbis with a great deal of respect and ridiculous excuses made for his behavior and why he's what seem to be creepy things that he does aren't really creepy. Here the rabbis are going to concede at least one point, which is that Jacob likes the ladies, and as long as you can keep him there with plying him with women, he won't go anywhere. So it says it's his nature to be attracted by women. So whenever he's starting to talk about it's time for me to go, get him another woman. So the Teraphim, that was the Teraphim that gave them those words of advice. Let's read what happened. Excuse me.
Laban went back to Jacob and said, "Tell me, what shall your wages be?" And he replied, "You think I came here to make money? I only came to get me a wife." For Jacob had no sooner beheld Rachel than he fell in love with her and made her a proposal of marriage. Rachel consented, but added the warning, "My father is cunning and you are not his match." Jacob, "I am his brother in cunning." Rachel, "But is deception becoming to the pious?" Jacob, "Yes, with the righteous righteousness is seemly, and with the deceiver deception did." "But," continued Jacob, "tell me wherein he may deal cunningly with me." Rachel, "I have an older sister whom he desires to see married before me, and he will try to palm her off on you instead of me." To be prepared for Laban's trickery, Jacob and Rachel agreed upon a sign by which he would recognize her in the nuptial night.
Right. So let's pause right there. This is the Midrash that some of you might know, which is this elaborate and very interesting Midrash about how Jacob gets tricked, which is interesting because the Midrash basically says Jacob was warned he was going to get tricked. So the interesting thing about this is that, this is Laban's nature to trick people. Jacob actually admits to being a trickster himself. Rachel says to him, "You're not as tricky as my dad. My dad takes it to a whole new level." And so she actually tells him specifically how this is going to go down. So what's so interesting about this Midrash is that it assumes that there's going to be trickery, that Jacob admits that he's a trickster, and that they actually work out a plan to foil the trick. Well, where is this from? This is from this idea that Jacob, as our ancestor, can't be a fool. He can't be the one that Laban will trick. So what has to happen is there has to be a con, and they're trying to con the con man. But in the end, it doesn't work. And so it's a whole level to this story, or a couple levels to this story, that we don't get in the text. The rabbis give us, and this is a great story. This is one of those great kind of, if you like The Sting, and if you like, the grifters, you like movies about grifters and con men. This is, what's it called? The one with Steve Martin and Michael Caine, right?
Oh,
whatever. And then they just remade it, a woman version of that. Anyways, those kind of con men movies.
Not
Ocean's
right?
11?
11 is also con men, but no, I'm
But
talking
there's another
about
one.
something something something
Julia
about
Roberts?
No. The one that was the Steve Martin and
Oh.
Michael Caine movie was I'm going to tell you right now because I got the computer right here. It was Dirty Rotten Scoundrels.
Yeah.
They just remade it with remade it with women, a woman's version of it. So who's phone is that? Oh, that's Floyd. Floyd, you got we got background noise on you. But we've got a story here of con men that are gonna get caught. They're gonna go back at them.
It's Floyd's phone.
Okay, I know. I got it. I'm working on it. So so when we look at this con, let's read what happens here.
Thus warned to be on his guard against Laban, Jacob worded his agreement with him regarding his marriage to Rachel with such precision that no room was left for distortion or guile. Jacob said, I know that the people of this place are knaves. Therefore, I desire to put the matter very clearly to you. I will serve you 7 years for Rachel, hence not Leah. For your daughter that you bring me not some other woman likewise named Rachel, for the younger daughter that you exchange not their names in the meantime. Nothing of all this availed. It profits not if a villain is cast into a sawmill. Neither force nor gentle words can circumvent a rascal. Laban deceived not only Jacob, but also the guests whom he invited to the wedding.
So the Midrash teaches us a very important lesson, which is that you cannot ever stop a scoundrel from being a scoundrel. If you have somebody who's a con man, you never can turn your back on them, and chances are you're going to get away with it anyways. Eventually, they're going to get away with it. So you have to know that that's what's going to happen. You cannot ever take for granted that you're going to get conned. You will eventually get conned, because again, Jacob tries to do everything. Don't give me another daughter. It's Rachel. It's in the contract. It's Rachel. Also, your daughter, Rachel, not another woman named Rachel. You're not going to give me somebody else named Rachel. It's your daughter, Rachel. And so what we're going to read is a midrash that basically says that in order for this to be pulled off, Laban couldn't do it by himself. Laban couldn't pull this off because essentially, according to the midrash, Jacob was aware that this was going to happen. Jacob didn't go into this, eyes wide open. And that's what happens. It doesn't matter. So here's what happens. And again, this is all based on the Torah saying, Jacob loved Rachel and said, I will serve you 7 years for your younger daughter, Rachel. So he didn't just say for Rachel. He didn't just say for your daughter. He said for your younger daughter, Rachel. The Torah spells it out. And it says that he said that because he knew what kind of person Laban was. Laban's answer was, better that I give her to you than I should give her to an outsider. Stay with me. That was the answer that he gave. We're going to talk about Leah now in a second, because it's real important to talk about her as well. But let's take a look at the marriage. Let's go.
After Jacob had served Laban 7 years, he said to his uncle, the Lord destined me to be the father of 12 tribes. I am now 84 years old, and if I do not take thought of the matter now, when can I? Thereupon Laban consented to let him have his daughter Rachel to wife, and he was married 44 years after his brother Esau. The Lord often deferred.
So where do they even get this from? They get this from doing the math on how long or how old Jacob was when he dies. They work backwards. And they try to figure out how long he worked for Laban, or how old he was when he finally left Laban. It's a very strange math, because it doesn't seem like he's that old when he gets married. But and by the way, it kind of goes counter to this idea that he loves women so much, because if he loves women so much, he's 84 years old when he gets married. You know, he's not exactly a player if he's 84 years old.
Plus, you usually wouldn't send an 84-year-old person out to mind the sheep, which is what the job that Jacob gets.
Yes. So this does seem very strange, but again, the rabbis kind of they stretch out how long it could be before Jacob actually gets married. So what happens here is that Jacob's delay in marriage becomes almost like a badge of honor for him, and you'll see that in the Midrash.
The Lord often defers the happiness of the pious, while he permits the wicked to enjoy the fulfillment of their desires soon.
That's us, all right? If you're a good person, you have to wait to have good things happen to you. Maybe, again, till you're 84.
Esau, however, had purposely chosen his 40th year for his marriage. He had wanted to indicate that he was walking in the footsteps of his father Isaac, who had likewise married at 40 years of age. Esau was like a swine that stretches out its feet when it lies down, to show that it is cloven-footed like the clean animals, though it is nonetheless one of the unclean animals. Until his 40th year, Esau made a practice of violating the wives of other men, and then at his marriage, he acted as though he were following the example of his pious father. Accordingly, the woman he married was one of his own kind, Judith, a daughter of Heth, for God said, "This one, who is designed for stubble to be burnt by fire, shall take to wife one of a people also destined for utter destruction." They, Esau and his wife, illustrated the saying, "Not for naught does the raven consort with the crow. They are birds of a feather."
Wow. So this midrash that was included here is another slam on Esau, which is that, yeah, Esau got married at 40. He did it partly because he wanted to show his dad that he was good like him, that he could wait till he was 40. So that was a midrash. I mean, that was an explanation. Then somebody else came along and said, yeah, no, that's not a good thing. Esau was just pretending to be a good person. He's like a pig. So Esau is a pig. And why is a pig the worst of the animals? Because a pig looks like it's kosher. It has cloven hooves. You'll only know that a pig isn't kosher once you cut it open and see what's inside. You can't tell from the outside. From the outside, it looks good, but it's not. So pigs are really kind of the worst animals because they look kosher, but they're not. And actually, the rabbis went further by saying, why are they even worse? Because they roll around and they show you their feet. They're rolling around on the mud. They're showing you their feet. They're going, look at me, I'm kosher. And then they trick you. They trick you with their tasty bacon. Tricky pig. You tricky pig are, again, needless to say, calling Esau and his descendants pigs is also meant to be definitely a pejorative, and to kind of call people pig is, in the ancient world, was not a good thing either. So Esau is like that, but the Midrash then further goes on to tell us that, again, Esau was a pig because he slept around, and not only that, he slept around with other people's wives, which is, it's not just adultery, it's adultery. It's not just that he was having premarital sex, he was violating other people's wives. So he's really not good. And sure enough, what does he do? He marries a woman named Judith. Not that Judith, not a Jewish Judith, a Judith who was a Hittite, who was a Canaanite. And this woman was just like him, played around, was not of high moral character, to say the least. She is most definitely slut-shamed here as a woman of low character. She is like Esau, and so that's why it says birds of a feather. That is Whose bird is that, by the way? Speaking of birds of a feather.
I'm
Seriously,
out. I'm out.
you gotta,
Those are the birds. Yep.
maybe you had, I thought somebody had a pet bird there. No,
It's very
those are,
cute
these,
backyard.
yeah, no, it is, but this is a crow. They're talking about actually ravens and crows, that they are not well respected either.
And
They're birds of
typical,
a feather. Yeah, they're raven shamed here. Yes.
typical though, you said that his wife, was slut shamed, but not Esau.
Oh,
Oh
yes,
no, he's a pig. You call him a pig.
I
a pig. And
He's
they
a
said
pig.
it's a
I mean,
pig for sleeping
I don't
around.
think
So
the rabbis take no, they do not hesitate to make Esau look bad. Again, there was a midrash that Esau waited a while to get married, which the Torah says he was 40 when he got married, which they say is the same age that Isaac was. So he did a good thing. No, somebody else came along and said, no, that isn't a good thing, because he really wasn't a good person during those 40 years. So yeah, he's the Judith one is strange because we don't know anything about her. And the Midrash comes along and basically says, oh, she's just like him. So this is this was, you got that family over there, and then you got this family over there. This is Isaac's two sons. Look how different they are. So this is the ultimate, and it still happens in the Jewish community today. You know, you've got one side of the family that, you know, does the right thing, and the other side of the family that doesn't do the right thing. It doesn't happen all the time. It happens sometimes, but it still happens. And people kind of hold it up as well, that side of the family went off the rails, you know. In Judaism and in kind of like Jewish history, we've had that, and they're saying that really one of the first examples of that is Jacob and Esau, because Esau didn't have to be that way, if you will. So here's how it was different for our family.
far different it was with Jacob. He married the two pious and lovely sisters, Leah and Rachel. For Leah, like her younger sister, was beautiful of countenance, form, and stature. She had but one defect. Her eyes were weak, and this malady she had brought down upon herself through her own action. Laban, who had two daughters, and Rebekah, his sister, who had two sons, had agreed by letter, while their children were still young, that the older son of the one was to marry the older daughter of the other, and the younger son, the younger daughter. When Leah grew to maidenhood and inquired about her future husband, all her tidings spoke of his villainous character, and she wept over her fate until her eyelashes dropped from their lids. But Rachel grew more and more beautiful day by day, for all who spoke of Jacob praised and extolled him, and good tidings make the bones fat.
Okay, let's talk about that for just a quick second. So the Torah does tell us this kind of strange feature about Leah, which is that her eyes were weak. Weak eyes. It's a strange word, and it's only 3 words in the Torah. Ve'enei Leah rekot. That her eyes were dim, were weak. But the rest of the line says that Rachel was shapely and beautiful, which is Yafat Toar, Yafat Mera'eh, which is she was nice to look at, but the Yafat Toar, that she was shapely, is a strange, or good shape, is a strange word. It's a strange phrase. If it had just said that she was nice to look at, that she was pretty, okay, I get that. But it says that she has a
figure.
good figure. It doesn't say that she's skinny, by the way. Could be that the Midrasher is actually alluding to the fact that she was, as we might say, softing.
Well, could it also be
Amen.
could it also be reference to the fact that she has childbearing hips, as it were,
Could be.
as opposed to Rachel, who has trouble giving birth? So
But
maybe
it's Rachel that it's Rachel that it says was shapely though.
Yeah. No, but
oh, I thought it was Leah that said that she was
no,
shapely.
it's Rachel that's got a good figure. No, so this is Rachel's body that they're
Okay.
commenting on. There's nothing about Leah's body. It's only her eyes, but it's Rachel's body and
Okay.
her. Yeah. Somebody
Maybe
was saying
they're trying to say that, just because a woman is woman shaped doesn't mean she's going to be good at having children.
that's a possibility. That's a possibility. The interesting thing that happens here, because we are going to read this, by the way, we're going to read about what's going on with the internal organs. The rabbis are fascinated by this because it doesn't seem to go along with this. But what we just read is this: the rabbis included this saying, if you will, this one of those sayings that people had, that good tidings make the bones fat, which again seems to be that she was happy. She knew she was going to be marrying Jacob, which made her happy, and that this was that this made her have big bones. She was big. She had, but it was definitely healthy. She's healthy and she has a healthy body, and that doesn't mean that she's, again, I mean, the translation that they used was shapely, but the implication is it had something to do with her body, that her body was, I mean, that this was actually had an effect on her body, which is why the rabbis go with this interesting midrash. But let's look also, dial this down, dial it back a little bit too, or what's going on here. This is this part of this tradition we have that Leah was supposed to marry Esau. That's the important part. I mean, the Rachel, what she looked like is really not the important part here. They get to that part to show the difference between Leah and Rachel. But the interesting thing is that they're going to draw in this midrash, this explanation that Leah was supposed to marry Esau, and the reason that her eyes go bad is because she's been crying this whole time because she doesn't want to marry him, and she knows how bad he is. So that's why her eyes are weak. Her eyes are actually weak because of her own piousness, because she's a good person and because she doesn't want to marry a bad person. So it actually gives the reason for the way they look based on Jacob and Esau. So Jacob and Esau's character causes one of them to turn out nice and one of them to turn out somewhat messed up, if you will. We don't know. The problem is the rabbis don't know. They didn't know by their time. What does this mean that she had weak eyes? Does it mean that she didn't see well? It doesn't seem to make sense, which is why that they give us this answer that, well, she didn't see well. It's because she cried so much and that her eyelashes all fell out and hurt her eyes and made her eyes look weird. But it could be that originally the real Hebrew meaning of this just simply meant that it was hard.
Poor eyesight.
Or
that she needed glasses.
Well, I was going to say no. It could be that that she was, if you will, we'd still use the word today like, well, you could say that she was tough to look at. But it seems to be having her eyes. I mean, it seems to be her eyes being the weak part of it. But is it somehow that her eyes looking weak made her whole body or her whole face look bad? So not just that her eyesight was bad, that it seems like the juxtaposition of those two lines seems to be that it has something to do with her outward appearance. That it's not just that her eyes were bad, but that something about her messed up her, like she was washed out.
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
if your eyes are bad, then and maybe you squint, that doesn't make you look very good.
Could be.
Or they
but
could have been crossed eyes or what we call wall eyes.
Could be. Could be.
What are walleye?
That's where your eyes don't track and one turns to the outside.
Okay,
So
thank you.
It could be that again, that this was not about something that had anything other to do than, and the rabbi seemed to be going down this road, that it was a physical imperfection. It was something that was outward and not just affected her vision. So keep this in mind. I mean, this is in the Torah, but it's only 3 words. So this is the setup for this story of Leah and Rachel. Jacob. So here's what it says.
In view of the agreement between Laban and Rebekah, Jacob refused to marry the older daughter, Leah. As it was, Esau was his mortal enemy on account of what had happened regarding the birthright and the paternal blessing. If now Jacob married the maiden appointed for him, Esau would never forgive his younger brother. Therefore, Jacob resolved to take to wife Rachel, the younger daughter of his uncle.
Yep. So here's a weird midrash, which is that, okay, if this really was the situation where Esau was supposed to marry Leah, it actually tells us that Jacob really didn't want to marry Leah because this would make Esau even more upset. So this is another possibility that Leah had there was another complication here. There was another problem with Leah, which is that this is just gonna make things even worse with his brother. Okay.
Laban was of another mind. He purposed to marry off his older daughter first, for he knew that Jacob would consent to serve him a second period of 7 years for love of Rachel.
So Laban, and again, this seems to be really kind of at the face of it, which is who needs this other complication of Esau in the background? Laban just wanted to marry his daughter off because he knew he could get 2 sets of years of 7 years for him. That this is 2 contracts that he could get. That's what it comes down to. And by the way, that seems to be, on the face of it, what really does happen in the Torah. Okay.
On the day of the wedding, he assembled the inhabitants of Haran and addressed them as follows. You know well that we used to suffer from lack of water, and as soon as this pious man Jacob came to dwell among us, we had water in abundance. What have you in mind to do? They asked Laban. He replied, if you have naught to say against it, I will deceive him and give him Leah to wife. He loves Rachel with an exceeding great love, and for her sake, he will tarry with us yet another 7 years. Do as it pleases you, his friend said. Well then, said Laban, let each one of you give me a pledge that you will not betray my purpose.
Wow. So this is an interesting midrash here, folks, that Laban has accomplices in this, that he couldn't have pulled this ruse off unless the whole city of Haran, the whole town, went along with him.
A conspiracy theory.
It's a conspiracy. This is a big conspiracy. This is not just a couple people. This is the whole town. And how does this work? It works because ever since Jacob came to town, they've had good stuff happen. The water, they've got water. We never had water before. Now Jacob comes here, we got water. We can't let this guy go ever. So this is like there's another movie like this, by the way, where everybody deceives the guy, and they all play. Oh, it's a Truman Show.
Oh, yes.
Truman Show, where everybody's in on it, and they got to keep the guy because the show goes off the air if the guy ever gets out. So this is a little bit like that, in that they all have to work together on this. Otherwise there's nothing, they go back to normal. I think this has been used in other, there's other shows that, or other movies where this kind of happens. Usually it's more like a horror story where the person can't leave, because if the person leaves, then, we've got to, which, by the way, if you think about it, is could be in the back of their minds, which is, hey, we got this lucky charm. If we ever get to a point where this guy's going to leave, they could very well kill the guy and stuff him and take his head as a tear-off and say, you know what, Jacob's not going anywhere. I mean, this is actually, how many movies have you seen, unfortunately, horror movies have used this as a premise, which is, you're never going to leave,
But didn't he and didn't Jacob and Rachel have like the secret handshake or something?
So we're getting to that. Oh yeah.
Okay.
We're getting to that. But here's the point. Here's the point. Oh, we're almost there. Don't worry. But the point is that the rabbis give us this idea that it wasn't Laban acting alone, that Laban actually got everybody in on it, because even before that scene, which is the scene, which is, like I said, a lot of people know this Midrash. What I wanted to tell you is you didn't know the whole story, which is that it couldn't have been just one person. It couldn't have just been Rachel who went along with this. The whole city had to go along with it, because to some extent, there's part of this, which is that, okay, well, they have a big wedding celebration. Is anybody going to go, hey, you should look under that veil. That doesn't look like Rachel. But there's this other issue, which is what happens to Laban when the ruse when it's all over the next day. What happens to Laban if he doesn't make everybody complicit in his crime? Because then he's a lowlife for the rest of his life. By getting everybody to sign in on the beginning, nobody can turn around to Laban and go, hey, you're a crook. We all know you're a crook. Because he goes to him, what are you talking about? You're all part of this. You're all part of this now. So there's a very interesting thing that Laban did, which is kind of, again, human nature, which is that if you force everybody to be complicit in your crime, you're no longer the only criminal in town. Everybody's part of it. And so this is a very clever thing that Laban does, which is spread his guilt over everybody. But it's even further, because Laban got money from everybody. He took a pledge from everybody as collateral that they wouldn't give away his secret. And what does he do with said pledges? He doesn't hold them. This is what he does.
Don't scroll that up.
Sorry, yeah. Let me go up to here.
With the pledges they left with him, Laban bought wine, oil, and meat for the wedding feast, and he set a meal before them which they themselves had paid for. Because he deceived his fellow citizens thus, Laban is called Arami, the deceiver.
Yeah, and that's one of the readings of Arami, Oved Avi, that Arami is not just an Aramean, but that it is a deception that he's known as the deceiver. So even though they're all complicit, it doesn't stop them from knowing that this guy is the big deceiver. This is the guy that, again, this becomes his nickname, that he is the deceiver.
They feasted all day long until late at night, and when Jacob expressed his astonishment at the attention shown him, they said to him, "Through your piety, you did a great service of loving kindness to us. Our supply of water was increased to abundance, and we desire to show our gratitude, therefore." And indeed, they tried to give him a hint of Laban's purpose. In the marriage ode, which they sang, they used the refrain Haleah in the hope that he would understand it as Ha-Leah, this is Leah. But Jacob was unsuspicious and noticed nothing.
Yeah, so this is an interesting midrash, which is that the people of Haran, on one hand, thank him and say, look, well, he sees this wonderful party for him. He says, why are you going through all this trouble for me? I'm not even from this town. And they said, well, ever since you got here, there's a lot of water, which is true. But they're also they also do something interesting, which is they try to give him a clue of what's going on. They try to help him a little bit. Now, this is a play on the fact that one of the marriage songs that people used to sing in the Middle East was Haliyah, which sounds like, hey, Leah, it's Leah. So this is a play on the fact that this marriage song, Haliyah, is actually was a clue, was their way of trying to tell him what's going on. So it's a play on the song, Haliyah. So this is, they're complicit, but at the same time, they're trying to help him. They're trying to tell him what's happening.
When the bride was led into the nuptial chamber, the guests extinguished all the candles, much to Jacob's amazement. But their explanation satisfied him. Thank you, they said. We have as little sense of decency as your countrymen. Jacob therefore did not discover the deception practiced upon him until morning.
So what do? They turned off the lights. So once Leah comes in, so this is explains the other thing is how did Jacob not know that he's getting the wrong wife? And the answer is they turned off the lights. And the reason that they turn off the lights that they give him is that we're not like back in Canaan where everybody is disgusting and they all have sex with the lights on. No, we turn off the lights. We have a lot of class in our country. And so we don't do that. So what happens? It's dark. And not only do they give him a reason, but they basically they slag his country. They're like, no, you guys are disgusting. You're low class people. That's not the way we do it here in Haran. So that's part of the deception. They turn off the lights and they actually, of course, give them a reason for it, which makes him even feel worse. Yep.
Jacob therefore did not discover the deception practiced upon him until morning. During the night, Leah responded whenever he called her Rachel, for which he reproached her bitterly when daylight came. Oh, you deceiver, daughter of a deceiver, why did you answer me when I called Rachel's name? Is there a teacher without a pupil? Asked Leah in return. I but profited by your instruction. When your father called you Esau, did you not say, here am I?
Yep. So again, this goes to the version of the Midrash that Phyllis was talking about, which is that they set up code words so that they would know that this trick had been pulled off. This Midrash goes even further, which says that there's one version of it that Rachel's actually lying underneath the bed and actually speaks while Leah's in bed so that the deception would be able to be complete, so that Leah's voice you wouldn't even be able to tell Leah's voice. All of these are based on this idea that Jacob doesn't go into this blind. He actually knows that this is very much a possibility, that Laban will trick him, but that it doesn't matter, that there are tricks, that they trick the trickster. And so here we have in all versions of this Midrash where Jacob is confronted when he says to his wives, why did you do this to me? That they confront him with
Well, you did it to your father.
Yeah, and you actually, your father called you and you said Esau. So here they revisit Jacob's words, and this is a perfect example of the rabbi saying, did Jacob do something wrong? Yes, he must have in the scheme of things, and he gets payback. And not only that, he's of course going to be tricked by his sons too. So the trickster is always getting tricked. He's always suffering a measure for measure type situation where, he doesn't get away with it. The rabbis are very clear. And again, the Torah sets that up. But the Torah doesn't say, and I will show it to you, the Torah doesn't say, it doesn't say that. It doesn't say, well, you're a tricker, you're a trickster. So when when we read this story here. Let's get to it. When morning came, there was Leah. So he said to Laban, "Why have you done this to me? I was in service for Rachel. Why did you deceive me?" So first of all, it doesn't say that he confronts his wives. He confronts his father-in-law. And Laban said, "It is not the practice in our country, in our place, to marry off the younger before the older." So Laban doesn't say, "Hey, you're a trickster and you're going to get tricked." It says that Laban says, I have to follow our custom. And the Torah says, "Wait until the bridal week is over and we will give you that one too, provided you serve me another 7 years." Jacob did so. He waited until the bridal week of the one, and then he gave him his daughter Rachel as wife. So the Torah actually tells us that he did get both of his wives essentially at the same time. I mean, he had to wait a week. It doesn't make Laban look good, but it makes him look a little bit better, which is that he's basically saying, "Look, we can't do this." It definitely doesn't sound good because he says, "I'm going to give you that one too." He doesn't say, "I'm giving you my daughter." He says, "I'm giving you that one." But it doesn't say anywhere there that it is because of the fact that you're a trickster and you do that kind of stuff. But again, the Midrash picks up on it. It tells us that Jacob was a deceiver and then he gets deceived. And even more so that Jacob essentially, she says, is there a teacher without a pupil? You're the one who does this. You taught us. So it really blames Jacob completely. And so it uses those words Hineni back very powerfully as saying, "And remember, Jacob, your words Hineni." So let's continue.
Jacob was greatly enraged against Laban, and he said to him, "Why did you deal treacherously with me? Take back your daughter and let me depart, seeing you acted wickedly toward me." Laban pacified him, however, saying, "It is not done so in our place to give the younger before the firstborn." And Jacob agreed to serve yet 7 other years for Rachel. And after the 7 days of the feast of Leah's wedding were fulfilled, he married Rachel.
So a happy ending. Not really. But it's a very biblical ending, which is that everything gets worked out. It's not fun. It's not fun for It's not fun for Leah. It's not fun for Rachel. Jacob gets
Fun for Jacob.
Jacob gets even better. Gus?
Yes.
Why?
With Leah and Rachel, Jacob received the handmaids Zilpah and Bilhah, 2 other daughters of Laban, who his concubines had borne to him.
Now that's not in the Torah, folks. Which is Bilhah and Zilpah and Bilhah, the handmaidens of Leah and Rachel, respectively, mothers of our people of the 12 tribes. Not the main 12 tribes, but 4 of the tribes. A good third of the tribes are Bilhah Zilpah tribes. By the way, if you do the math, which you can very easily, 6 of the tribes are Leah tribes. So half the tribes are Leah's people, including us. We are the tribe of Judah, which means we're from the 4th son, Leah's son. There are also, and some of us are Levites, we're from the 3rd son. Some of us would be from the tribe of Benjamin. We just are mixed in because the tribe of Benjamin was where Jerusalem was, and that area survived. So there's some Benjaminites that are still walking around. We don't know who are Benjaminites. We know that Mordecai was a Benjaminite, by the way, and Esther. They were Benjaminites. But most of the tribes are gone. But half the tribes came from Leah herself. So 50% of the tribes were Leah people. Bilhah and Zilpah, though, are, according to the Midrash, Laban's daughters. Does anyone want to guess why they're Laban's daughters? Why they have to be Laban's daughters? Well, they have to be Abraham people.
Oh.
If they're not Abraham people, these are just two slaves, maidens, concubines, geishas. I mean, what? They're not a high class people. But even more so, what if they are not even Abraham people? So they can't go down that road. The rabbis cannot go down that road that Bilhah and Zilpah are from somewhere else. So here we have this weird consequence from this, which is that Zilpah and Bilhah, these two handmaids, are none other than their own half sisters. That's kind of creepy in itself. But for the rabbis, it's less creepy than these are non-Israelites or non-Abraham people. I don't say Israelites, non-Abrahamic. So it's better for them to be relatives too, than for them to be just random women that are brought into the people. Again, it's not in the Torah at all. There's nothing to give us this understanding that Zilpah and Bilhah are anything other than servant girls. Anything different than Hagar was. It's hard to say handmaiden now.
Yes.
Really hard to say handmaiden. Thanks to Margaret Atwood. It's gotten really hard to say handmaid now. Thank you, Margaret Atwood, in your Handmaid's Tale. You have made it modern, or you've given us a modern midrash on this, which makes it that much harder to comprehend and wrap our heads around, because we don't want to think about this. This is not a good place to go down, because Bilhah and Zilpah, well, most people don't even know those people's names. We don't add, when we do the Amidah, we don't do their names. We say Leah and Rachel and Leah. We don't say Zilpah and Bilhah.
There was a movement, I thought, to have them included.
Yeah, I
don't know what happened to it.
I had a woman who was in rabbinical school with me who wanted to include all 6 names, matriarch names, in the Amidah, and it didn't catch on. It is look, I like doing the egalitarian version of it. I do. But there's a viable point that, a legitimate point, all the matriarchs should be named. And that not naming the matriarch of 4 tribes, of a quarter of our tribes, is an offense, a slight to them. I mean, again, most of us are not descendants. Those are the tribes of, of Naphtali and Dan. And I mean, we don't know those people. We don't know who's a descendant of those ladies, but they are matriarchs. Okay. But I will tell you, every time we say those names, Leah and Rachel, not every time, but a lot of times when I say those names, it's a kick in the face to be reminded of the fact that this scene in the Bible happens. There's no good way to make this scene anything other than a Doreen. You can hear your call. There's no other way to make sense of this other than to say this was not a good scene for Leah and Rachel to have to be married to the same guy as sisters, and it's against biblical law. The Bible prohibits this thing from happening. It says in the Torah you're not allowed to marry 2 sisters. Even when polygamy was allowed, this wasn't allowed. This is not good. This is not the way things were supposed to be. And it is a reminder when you say the names Leah and Rachel together that this was, if not, something that went off the rails, that we have a problem here. And Zilha and Bilhah further, remind us, and we need to honor them. We definitely need to recognize them. This is a further problem with the story, because the rabbis, when you go to this, well, this is the way it had to happen because this is the way we had the 12 tribes. If we hadn't had 4 women, we wouldn't have had 12 tribes. Because there's a possibility, and the rabbis are going to give it to us, that one of these women, and actually Rachel in particular, would have had 12 kids if this hadn't happened. This wasn't really supposed to happen. There's that stream that exists in the Midrash, that this really wasn't the way this was supposed to happen. The situation got fixed, if you will, but it didn't have to happen like this. And could a woman have 12 kids? Most definitely she could have 12. And actually, not 12 kids, 13 kids, because there is Dinah. And even more bizarro is that maybe there were a lot more daughters that we don't read about and get names from. Because that's what we're going to start reading now. We have about 20 minutes more, and we're going to jump into the arms race, the body race, the arms, head, and legs race of Jacob's children. This Midrash set is what we'll be reading next week too. It is our attempt to try to understand a very problematic part of the Torah, one that the rabbis are going to have some problems with, that you and I maybe don't. We have other problems with it. They had problems with it. And many of the rabbis lived in a time when polygamy was accepted anyways, may not have been encouraged, because by the rabbinic period, it was definitely not encouraged to have more than one wife. So keep that in mind. But they are obviously are also going to try to get Jacob off the hook for doing anything wrong in this scene. And you can make the argument, Jacob didn't choose to do this. I mean, keep in mind, Jacob didn't say, hey, I'd like to marry all your daughters. Give me all your ladies. He never says that. Jacob was in love with a woman. It tells us he's in love with a woman, and he's tricked into it. And he actually confronts Laban and says, why did you do this to me? This doesn't seem to be a guy who goes, hey, look at me. I got two for the price of, well, first of all, I didn't get 2 for the price of 1, but I get 2 wives. He doesn't seem to want this. This doesn't seem to be his scene, if you will. Let's read about the birth of the children.
The ways of God are not like the ways of men. A man clings close to his friend while he has riches and forsakes him when he falls into poverty. But when God sees a mortal unsteady and faltering, he reaches out a hand to him and raises him up. Thus it happened with Leah. She was hated by Jacob, and God visited her in mercy. Jacob's aversion to Leah began the very morning after their wedding, when his wife taunted him with not being wholly free from cunning and craft himself.
So the rabbis point out that if that midrash is true, that Leah confronted Jacob with his own, you're calling me a liar, you're the biggest liar. So the rabbis say that didn't end well. It didn't end well, not just because Jacob is not happy that he's married to the wrong woman, but that he didn't like to be confronted by the truth. That he did not like his wife humiliating him with the truth. Wow. This is a midrash that goes to a whole nother level of human dynamics, marital relations, not what you'd think the midrash would do, and it does it in a really powerful way, and it really is some beautiful commentary. I also want to show you what the Torah actually says, okay? Because you need to know that this is actually, the rabbis have to deal with this because the Torah says this. It says Jacob did so. He waited out the bridal week of the one And then he gave him his daughter Rachel as a wife. Also, Laban got Bilhah as daughter, as a maid. And it says, and Jacob cohabited with Rachel also. Indeed, he loved Rachel more than Leah, and he served him another 7 years. The Lord saw that Leah was unloved, and he opened her womb, but Rachel was barren. The Torah tells us that God got involved in this. And so the rabbis have to then explain that. They have to be able to give us a full context of why this happens and why God had to get involved. Because God, once God's brought into it, this is to some extent out of Jacob's hands. It's out of Leah and Rachel's hands, because God did this. And so the rabbis are going to explain why God did it. Jacob really, really treated Leah poorly, and God had to intervene. Let's read it.
Then God said, help can come to Leah only if she gives birth to a child. Then the love of her husband will return to her. God remembered the tears she had shed when she prayed that her doom, chaining her to that recreant Esau, be averted from her. And so wondrous are the uses of prayer that Leah, besides turning aside the impending decree, was permitted to marry Jacob before her sister and be the first to bear him a child. There was another reason why the Lord was compassionately inclined toward Leah. She had gotten herself talked about. The sailors on the sea, the travelers along the highways, the women at their looms, they all gossiped about Leah, saying, she is not within what her seeming is without. She appears to be pious, but if she were, she would not have deceived her sister. To put an end to all this tattle, God granted her the distinction of bearing a son at the end of 7 months after her marriage. He was one of a pair of twins, the other child being a daughter. So it was with 11 of the sons of Jacob. All of them except Joseph were born twins with a girl, and the twin sister and brother married later on. It's weird.
Oh, I told you this was weird.
Can you scroll up? I'm at the end here.
Altogether, oh, sorry. Yeah.
Altogether, it was an extraordinary childbirth, for Leah was barren, not formed by nature to bear children.
So let's dissect and decipher that section, because I think that may be where we finish. Because you read a paragraph that had so much involved in there. Gosh, where do we even begin? So God has to be the equalizer here. God has to intervene. God has to fix the situation, and He fixes it. God fixes it in a really big way, which is that she gets to have kids. So let's read the end first. Well, wait.
Well,
yeah, go on, Rosemary.
I can't go on. You need to move the page.
No. I wanted to read the end. You read it. I thought your comment about it. She doesn't seem to be Leah, who has all these kids.
Yeah, it says she's not naturally. Not. Yeah, that's weird.
She wasn't supposed to have any kids.
She wasn't supposed to have any kids.
Physically, she's infertile. And so the fact that she has kids at all is a miracle. So that's one thing that happens here. The other thing, well, we kind of already talked about it, is that she doesn't want to marry Esau. And so she gets rewarded for that. So that is tremendously important, that she is able to have kids. Look, the Torah sets it up that Leah is not loved. The Torah says that she's in this situation where her husband doesn't treat her well. And that no matter what she does, as we're going to see, even having kids doesn't work. Which seems to imply, by the way, that God's plan is only somewhat effective. That love is so powerful. I mean, this is one of the takeaways. Love is so powerful that even having children, even God making miracles doesn't stop Jacob from loving Rachel more than Leah. So God can't stop it from happening. That's kind of the concept. I mean, that's one of the takeaways from this, is that even God can't stop those emotions, because God does everything possible, makes miracles happen, gives this woman a child after 7 months, which usually would seen as not a good thing. You don't want to have a child necessarily 2 months premature. That's not usually a good start for a baby.
Especially right after the marriage.
Well, yes, and especially 3,000 years ago before they had neonatal care units.
And
So
especially being blamed, especially having been blamed for being a little bit immoral.
Yep. So this is really strange that the rabbis set this up, which is that this blessing, which the Torah doesn't really say happens at all. So she has a kid, and his name is Reuven. We're going to talk about that maybe today, maybe next week, why the names are so important. And the Torah tells us the names are important. But in this story, which is already complicated, they've complicated it further by having this midrash that Leah has a child early.
Maybe it's not early.
That's what I was thinking.
Because it says 7 months after, they got married.
I was thinking God was trying to make Jacob look bad, or at least make Leah, make it look like Jacob hadn't been tricked, that he'd been sleeping with Leah all along.
Well, or somebody else had been sleeping with Leah all along.
Right.
I think that's what the Midrash sets up a story that doesn't even exist in the Torah, which is that she has a baby after 7 months.
Excuse me?
Yeah.
Marina, sometimes when women are having twins, they give birth early because their body just can't hold them in.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yep. But the rabbis do say that part of and they set the story up. I mean, this is their creation, that they set up the story that by having a child after only 7 months after marriage, this is going to cause people to talk. And so this is the story that they set up. They want to set up an answer. And again, you're right. Maybe one of their answers is because they have twins, they're going to have the babies earlier. But, which of course then gives us, if we go down that road of the twins, all of Jacob's kids were twins, which of course, why do we even have that version? Why do we have that addition? Because we get this problem of who did Jacob's sons marry? Because if it was hard to find a wife for 1 kid or 2 kids, how hard is it going to be to find wives for 12 kids? Now, I will tell you, that's creepy. It gets a little less creepy if you follow the rabbinic logic, which is that they didn't marry their full sister, they married their half sisters. Still pretty creepy by our standards, by our understanding. But by the rabbinic logic, it's not so different than what Abraham did. Because, right, according to tradition, Abraham marries Sarah, who he claims is his sister. And remember, the Midrash tells us that they were, in fact, half brother and half sister. So this isn't, we don't have that in the Torah, but could be. And the rabbis definitely seem to assume that that's the case. So is it possible? Yes, it is possible that we're talking about half sisters. I mean, it's pretty messed up from the genetic standpoint, because if you're talking about a normal situation where people are half brother and half sister, and let's say the 2 mothers are completely different genetic material, it's a lot of genetic material the same, 50%, but it's also 50% not the same genetic material. When you got 2 sisters married to the same guy, even if the half brothers and half sisters are marrying each other, it's all the same genetic material. You start off with 2 sisters. So it's pretty, from a genetic standpoint, it's really, really not good. There'd be a lot of inbreeding there. if you follow the logic of this. But again, they're concerned with where would, Naphtali and Zebulun and all these other sons, where would they possibly get women from to marry? Because the rabbis 100% would rather have those women marrying their relatives and very close relatives than a Canaanite. That's how strong they were in their hope and their belief that these were not Canaanites that our ancestors married. When on the face of it, that's probably who they married. I mean, who did Judah marry? I mean, the argument actually is a moot point, because it says that at least in the next generation, Judah married off his son to a Canaanite woman, Tamar, who he winds up sleeping with in that story in Genesis chapter 38. We have a story of Judah having children with a Canaanite woman who is a righteous woman and who, quite frankly, is our ancestor. So we're at least Canaanite through Tamar. We'll get to that Midrash in a few weeks, because the rabbis do have something to say about that.
Did Lavan why didn't the rabbis just give him sons who would have children, or daughters who would have other daughters who would have children that the 12 tribes could marry into?
There are Midrashim that Laban did have sons and did have a family, but there's other Midrashim that he only had daughters, which is why he was stuck. He's stuck because if he doesn't marry off his daughters, he's got nothing. If his daughters are, he's relying on his daughters having husbands because he doesn't have anything else. So the Midrash, that Midrash chain works really well with Laban being really concerned with who his daughters marry, because his whole future is based on it. There are no sons to take over. It's not clear if that's the case, which, by the way, I mean, keep this in mind. When Jacob, I'm not ruining the story for anybody, but in a few weeks, Jacob's going to run away from Laban. When Jacob leaves Laban and takes his grandkids with him, that's Laban's future, if Laban doesn't have any sons. If Laban has no other family than who just got packed up and left, it makes Laban look a lot more, I wouldn't say pious, but it makes him look a lot more human, in that he's really concerned that his whole future just walked out the door. So that is a possibility. We're not sure that that's the case. I mean, the idea that Laban doesn't have any other family, I mean, Laban definitely has people with him when he comes after him, when he comes after Jacob. So that's there. And Laban has other people clearly working for him. But again, it would also mean that who were Laban's sons' wives? Who would be marrying onto the people there as well. And yeah. I will tell you, when we get to Jacob running away from Laban, I will tell you, I mean, this is in the Torah, I just read it. In chapter 31, when we actually read about it, I don't have to read it by myself. I'll get you all a look at this, a look-see here. Let's take a look at the Torah, shall we? So if we scroll down to chapter 31, when Jacob runs away, let us read this. I went too far. It's hard for me. I can't see the verses. Here. When Laban confronts him, he says, "Why did you flee in secrecy and mislead and not tell me? I would have sent you off with festive music with timbrel and lyre, which seems to be a lie. It seems to be the lyre seems to be Lavan, not the musical instrument. But that's what he says. And he says to him, you did not even let me kiss my sons and daughters goodbye. It was a foolish thing for you to do. And that's the word that's used in Hebrew. Levanai velivnotai. My sons and my daughters.
What sons?
He doesn't have any sons, but he does have grandsons. And it seems to be that when Laban says my sons and my daughters, that he's actually talking about his grandsons who have now taken the place of the sons that he never had. I'm just saying, it makes Laban's story look a little bit more human, if you will, that Laban is actually has a real reason to be upset. Yeah, a lot going on in this paragraph that makes it even more troubling than you may have thought. That this is a complicated story that the Midrash further complicates and makes even more complicated. But Jacob's feelings towards Leah are very much a part of the Torah. They exist as a tough reminder of, I wouldn't say Jacob's pettiness, because Jacob didn't want this situation, and Jacob isn't being, Jacob's being reminded of this trick for the rest of his life. This isn't just a trick that, you get over. How do you get over being married to the wrong woman? To a woman that you didn't necessarily, again, you didn't sign up for this.
Where is the Midrash that Anita Diamond got for where Red Tent, he says that they have a good relationship.
He must have. He had 11 something children with her.
No, but beyond sexual. So is there a whole other set of Midrashim?
I'm trying to think if there's a yes, and I'm not sure if we're going to look at it if it's in this section, but there is a stream, and it exists definitely in the pseudepigrapha, in the non-rabbinic sources of the period, the texts that we got from the church, who kept these midrashim or these explanations alive that were maybe not traditional midrash, but do exist. I'm not, and Ginsburg, whose compilation is what we're reading, does use pseudepigrapha. So I'm not sure if it's in here at all over the next few weeks. But there is a stream that Leah does begin to have a grudging admiration from, and I would say a grudging admiration from Jacob, that Jacob does start to respect Leah because of her ability to give birth to people, and that she does eventually kind of get respect from Jacob. But there's a problem with any of those midrashim, and even again what Anita Diamond did, which, look, I'm glad she did it because it makes Jacob look less problematic, I would say. Look, I mean, you can't really blame Jacob. I mean, it's hard for us to imagine what it would be like for Jacob to be in this situation, because he's in a horrible no-win situation with this, because if he shows too much love to Leah, does it make Rachel feel even worse? So I don't really know how to answer that. I mean, who knows how hard it would have been for Jacob. But there is a problem, which is that the Torah tells us at the end of his life, when he calls all of his children together to bless them, that Jacob is still talking about Rachel. Which means that Judah, Reuben, Simon, Levi, all of the sons of Leah are sitting there on Jacob's deathbed and have to hear their father go on about Rachel. It didn't say nothing about Leah. I mean, nothing. The Torah doesn't keep one word about Jacob paying Leah any honor. Now, again, the rabbis do point this out and say, wait, but she got to be buried next to him. But that's not what the Torah says. The Torah gives us the last words out of Jacob's mouth. He continues to talk about Rachel, which I think is really powerful. It's really quite beautiful. But it is a problem for Leah's sons, that he's still carrying this torch for Rachel, which you can't escape. And again, Nina Diamond doesn't escape. She doesn't forget that Jacob has this special relationship with Rachel. But this is really, really bad. It's a bad scene for a long time. That this competition between Leah and Rachel, the rabbis know, they don't minimize it. They, in some ways, give it more life. They give it more depth, and they deal with it. They don't avoid it. But what do you do? I mean, whose fault is this? I mean, I guess it's Laban's fault. But and again, the rabbis are not going to say this isn't the way it was supposed to be. And I mean, this was the way it was supposed to be, because how else would we have 12 kids? Because as I said, there's also a midrash that all those kids were supposed to come, all of us were supposed to be Rachel's kids.
What happened to the twin sisters of all these babies?
Well, according to the rabbis, they married their brothers.
They're half brothers.
We don't have their names, by the way. The only daughter we know is Dinah. And by the way, she may have been a special birth.
What do you mean by special? Not twin?
Not a twin.
Okay.
Because there's different midrashim about how Dinah, because Dinah's the only named daughter, how she comes about. So we'll read a little bit of the midrash on Dinah. Not all of it, because I've read all of it. Well, I've read all of it that I could ever find. Anything that's ever been written about Dinah, I read before we named our daughter Dinah, because I knew what Dinah's name meant and who she was, and I wanted to have that story looked at from every angle. And we also named the daughter Rachel, so I wanted to know all the midrash about Rachel. So I've read these midrashim too, and we'll read them over the next couple of weeks. We're going to be reading about Rachel and Leah and the race for children, because again, we're going to pick up on Reuben's birth. We'll read about Reuben next week, and but I'm going to scroll through this kind of fast. You can see how much we've got about the sons. It's all these pages. Let's see, 1, 2, 2.5 pages. About almost over 2.5 pages about the sons being born and what their names mean. So there's quite a lot of midrash. And then sometime in the next couple of weeks, we're going to read about Jacob leaving, and we'll get up to chapter 31. So again, I'm going to jump on a quick call right now with the consul general. He actually just called me, told me he could call me at 11. We're going to plan out a little bit more this event for tonight. I promise you it'll be interesting. It'll be talked about. It'll be discussed, and hopefully you'll be part of the discussion. If you want to ask any questions, I'm asking people to text me, Zoom. No, don't Zoom it because I'll be off Zoom in a second. Text me, email me, call me if you have any questions you'd like me to ask the consul general, because I think it's going to be too hard during the Zoom call to do that, to take people's questions. I'm going to try to look at the chat as it's going on. So I'll try, but I'm not guaranteeing it. And I'm hoping that, again, if you have questions you'd like to ask, let me know ahead of time so that I can do my best to get them in there. And
will you be sending the information to the Zoom information for this tonight?
You didn't get it?
No.
It's on the e-blast.
Okay, I will look at it again. Sorry.
We just sent out another e-blast today. Besides
Okay.
Erica, Erica, are you there?
She's there.
Erica,
You're muted.
I'm here.
did you get the email I just sent you?
Yes, I did. Yeah, and I even emailed Tracy, and she had Susie put me back on the list, so I'll be getting everything.
All right. So most importantly, again, please share it with people. There's not a whole lot we can do for Yom Ha'atzmaut, but I thought if we couldn't have a celebration with music or dance or something else for Yom Ha'atzmaut, we could at least bring the Consul General. And as I said to some people recently, this is an example of taking an opportunity of this, because I guarantee you, I can't guarantee it, but I very much doubt that on Yom Ha'atzmaut I would have been able to get the Consul General of Israel to come to our community. Even if I could have gotten Chabad and CBS and everybody together, I very much doubt that we would have been able to get the Consul General of LA to come out to us from all the synagogues. He would have been at Stephen S. Weiss or Valley Beth Shalom or Sinai Temple. He would have got his bang for his buck. He's got to serve as many people as possible. But this was an example of us being able to get him and bring him out to our community because we're doing it on Zoom. So, in the end, there are opportunities, and we're able to do some things that we couldn't do otherwise. So we're trying to make the best out of this situation. And I hope you are able to join us. So please be with us and join us. So I will jump off and wish you all a good rest of the day as we celebrate Israel's sacrifices today, but also celebrate Israel's existence later on today with Yom Ha'atzmaut on Israel at 72. So
Wow.
take care, everybody, and stay safe. See you.
Thanks, Mark.
See you tomorrow night.
Bye.
Tomorrow at 7
See you
for Torah
tonight.
Day. Bye-bye.